Lynn, who sacrificed himself in the fire, crossed into the magical world of Harry Potter and unexpectedly awakened the power to control the flames. Is this a magic deep within his bloodline, or is it a gift from fate for his past good deeds? At Hogwarts, he met Irina, a girl who awakened the power to control the cold ice. They shared the same aspirations and were determined to open up a new path for the wizarding world. The power of flames and cold ice intersects, and will use the dual power of ice and fire to annihilate all powerful enemies. Lynn. I laughed at Dumbledore's lack of strategy and Voldemort's lack of intelligence. The contact between the wizarding world and the ordinary world is inevitable. Since neither you nor I want to perish in silence, let's erupt while everything is still under control. Irina. If a wizard is a tiger, then ordinary people are groups of wolves, and none of them can become their vassals. Only through cooperation can we win together. In the information age, the wizarding world will have nowhere to hide, and before everything can be undone, someone must step forward and correct it. Everyone says that the Black Demon King and the White Demon King, but if the Demon King is above the Demon God, then they are the strongest ice and fire demon gods in this magical world. No system, with a small number of secondary settings, single female lead, original female lead, overall suite. The pace of this book is relatively slow in the early stages, with 40 chapters entering the main storyline. Please be patient and read it. It has been authored for 3 years, signed for internal submission, and guaranteed quality. Keywords of the novel. Hogwarts Ice and Fire Demon God No Pop-ups, Hogwarts Ice and Fire Demon God TXT Complete Collection Download, Hogwarts Ice and Fire Demon God Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Rebirth in the Blaze. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Rebirth in the Blaze. Zila the scorching tongue licked every inch of his skin, and the crimson flames burned through his torn wounds. Lynn's eyes were bloodshot, and he pushed the child in his arms out of the fire with all his might, half kneeling on the ground feeling exhausted. The flames that devoured him made his skin scorch black, and the constant excruciating pain left him with no strength to stand up. Lynn's vision gradually became blurred, not only because of the twisted air under the high temperature, but also because of his gradually lost consciousness. His world became pitch black and void, and the burning sensation brought by the flames gradually faded away. After an unknown amount of time, Lynn regained consciousness under a warm light. He opened his eyes and wanted to say something, but what he heard was a baby's childish, babbling sound. Is this a rebirth? Lynn lifted his chubby hands, his small eyes filled with doubt. Suddenly, Lynn was picked up by a pair of slender and unsightly wrinkled hands. Before he could see the owner of these hands, which were completely different from humans, he was placed on the pillow of his mother in this lifetime. His mother in this lifetime was a stunning woman with long golden hair and black pupils. After learning that her child was safely born, she fell asleep peacefully. Lynn stared at the ceiling, as if unable to accept what was happening before him. For a long time, a sense of fatigue came, and Lynn closed his eyes and fell asleep. Time passes year by year, just like Merlin's stockings changing one by one. It seems like in the blink of an eye, Lynn has been reborn into this world for 11 years. In 1990, Roar Manor, UK. This is a grand and magnificent medieval estate, with a castle in the center that looks relatively old. However, although the exterior of the castle may seem dilapidated and full of a sense of time, the decoration inside the castle is up-to-date and full of a magnificent atmosphere. In the room by the window on the second floor of the castle, Lynn was standing in front of a full-length mirror adorned with gold edges. In the full-body mirror, there is a handsome boy with a slightly immature face, but dark red eyes with a hint of maturity. The boy has a head of black hair, and if you look closely, you can even find a hint of dark red in his hair. This seemingly accentuated dark red hair color was innate to Lynn, not acquired. In this world, Lynn's name is Lynn Rowell, transliterated as Lynn Rowell, and his surname is one of the Holy 28 pure blood families. Yes, the world that Lynn is currently in is the magical world of Harry Potter, and when he was first born, the owner of those slender and wrinkled hands was Gale, the house elf of Roar Manor. At this moment, Lynn finished tidying up his tie and shifted his gaze away from the full-body mirror. Suddenly, a collision sound came from outside the window. That is an owl constantly knocking on the window to enter, with a letter in its mouth. Did you finally come? Lynn's eyes flashed with an imperceptible joy. He quickly opened the window, let in the grey fluffy owl, and took the letter from its mouth. The envelope is made of thick parchment paper, while the address is written in emerald green ink. Roar Manor, a room on the second floor of the castle by the window received by Mr. Lynn Rawle. Sure enough, it's still this familiar recipe. Seeing this incredibly detailed address, Lynn's mouth slightly curled up. Lynn flipped through the envelope and saw a wax seal, a shield decoration, and a lion, an eagle, a badger, and a snake surrounded by the capital letter H. Lynn, who had 2 Harry Potter screenings in his previous life, was naturally very familiar with the Hogwarts school emblem. Although he could almost memorize the contents of the letter, Lynn still took out the first piece of paper with a hint of nervousness and excitement. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Principal. Albus Dumbledore, President of the International Federation of Wizards, First-Class Magician of the Order of Merlin, Chief Magician of Wizengamot. Dear Mr. Roar, we are pleased to inform you that you have been granted permission to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find attached a list of required books and equipment. The semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will be waiting for your owl to bring you a reply before July 31st. Vice Principal, Female, Dear Maliva McGonagall. After reading the first piece of paper, Lynn N. took out the second piece of paper pressed underneath. The second piece of paper contained the uniforms, books, wands, and other equipment that Lynn needed to enroll in Hogwarts. Lynn took note of each of them and took them back into the envelope along with the first piece of paper. Lynn took a deep breath. Although he was already prepared for what happened today, when Hogwarts' admission letter came to him, he still had a feeling of waking up from a dream. And then came excitement. Which fan did not fantasize about receiving a Hogwarts admission letter when they were young? Pop. Lynn carefully placed the envelope in his pocket and then raised his hand to snap his finger. Accompanied by a loud explosion, Gale, the household elf from Roar Manor, appeared in front of him. This is a domestic elf wearing a blue and white pillowcase. Although it looks wrinkled and very ugly, the brand new pillowcase and skin without any dirt make it look very clean. Young master, your breakfast is ready. Madam is already dining downstairs. Gale bowed to Lynn and said. I understand. Lynn nodded slightly and then went downstairs. In the center of the hall on the first floor of the castle, there was a round table, and the blonde woman sitting at the table was none other than Lynn I's mother, Rhoyna Roar. Lynn's mother, Rhoyna Roar, sounds similar to the founder of Hogwarts Ravenclaw College, Rhoyna Ravenclaw, but the two are not closely related. Rhoyna graduated from Slytherin at the time. Lynn and Faye finished breakfast quickly, put down his knife and fork, and said, Mom, I just received a letter from the owl. Later, I'm going to have Gale take me to Diagon Alley to buy the books and equipment needed for enrollment. Rhoyna nodded and said softly, Be careful. Luoina is not worried about whether Lynn will face danger when going to Diagon Alley. With a family elf named Gale following, even if Lynn goes to Overturned Alley, he may not encounter too much danger. After all, the magical ability of domestic elves exceeds that of the vast majority of wizards. Otherwise in the original work, after Dobby gained his freedom, he would not have easily defeated Lucius Malfoy. Lynn didn't say much, just gave her mother a strong hug. Since his rebirth, he has been dependent on Rhoyna. Apart from the domestic elf Gale, Rhoyna can be said to be the only person Lynn can trust in this world. As for his father, Hendry Roar, who was once a member of the Death Eaters, 10 years ago Hendry was killed by the suspicious Voldemort with a deadly curse for concealing something from him. And at that time, Rhoyna had just become pregnant with him. If it weren't for the Red Bull loyalty curse once placed on Roar Manor, which could not have been discovered by Voldemort, even Irina, who was still in the womb, would have been brutally murdered. However, it is strange that even Irina does not know who the secret keeper of the Red Bull loyalty curse at Roar Manor is. Fortunately, Voldemort collapsed a year after Lynn's birth, which made Irina no longer fearful every day. After releasing his mother, Lynn grabbed Gale's left hand. Gale raised his right hand and snapped his fingers, accompanied by a loud explosion, and Lynn and Gale disappeared into place. London, Broken Cauldron Bar. Lynn and Gale appeared at the entrance of the Broken Cauldron Bar, and Lynn looked around with a hint of curiosity. Although Lynn has left Roar Manor several times in the past 11 years, he has never been to the magical world in the future. In order to protect himself, he has endured his curiosity and only stayed in the Muggle world for the past 11 years. The modern electronic devices such as refrigerators that can be seen everywhere in the castle are the results of his efforts to use Muggle technology to transform the castle. In terms of daily life, it must be admitted that ordinary people know how to enjoy much more than these conservative wizards. Lynn's first impression of the Broken Cauldron Bar was that it was dirty. The lights were very dim, and the tables and floors seemed to be covered in a layer of oil, which made people feel uncomfortable. It seems like a new face, young wizard. Is it your first time coming to the Broken Cauldron Bar? Old Tom, the owner of the Broken Cauldron Bar, happily wiped the cup in his hand with a rag while looking up at Lynn. His gaze crossed over Lynn and saw Gale, the household elf behind him, with a clear understanding in his heart. It seems to be a little wizard from a pure-blood family. Yes, sir. I want to enter Diagon Alley. Lynn replied. Old Tom nodded and walked towards the back of the bar, not forgetting to continue wiping the dirty cup in his hand. Lynn followed him to a small courtyard surrounded by 4 walls, and his gaze turned to the lonely garbage bin placed by the wall. Remember, count up 3 blocks from here, then count down 2 blocks horizontally, and finally hit it with a wand. Old Tom routinely tapped the top of his wand 3 times on the wall. The bricks he had knocked on shook rapidly as they moved, forming a gradually larger opening in the middle that eventually turned into a wide arch. Across from the arch is a cobblestone paved street, which is Diagon Alley, the busiest commercial street in the wizarding world of England. Lynn crossed the entrance and turned around before it began to shrink, asking, by the way, why don't you use magic to clean the cup? I think the descaling spell should be able to achieve this goal. Old Tom shook the dirty cup in his hand and laughed, but that's one of the pleasures in itself. It's like you can completely enter Diagon Alley, isn't it? As soon as Old Tom finished speaking, the shrinking hole had disappeared and turned back into a wall. Upon seeing this, Lynn burst into laughter. Yeah, just like how he could directly have the domestic elf Gale take his phantom to Diagon Alley, but insist on experiencing the famous scene firsthand through the Broken Cauldron Bar. Internally invested. Don't worry about investing. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Redwood grafted with wood-on wood, burning the sky and boiling the sea. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Redwood grafted with wood-on wood, burning the sky and boiling the sea. Walking on the street of Diagon Alley, Lynn dug up the list again. First, you need to go to Gringotts to withdraw money, and then go to Ollivander Wand's shop. Lynn took out a rusty metal key from his pocket and thought to himself. There are many shops in Diagon Alley, and the one that attracts him the most is the Ollivander Wand shop, which sells wands that can assist him in controlling and casting magic. Soon, Lynn saw a snow-white building with a bronze gate, on which he could see 3 large characters. Ghouling Pavilion. On both sides of the bronze gate, there stood a fairy dressed in a crimson and gold-studded uniform. These fairies recognized the identity of the pure-blood family wizard of Lynn when they saw Gale behind him, and they flattered Lynn by welcoming him. In the eyes of these greedy fairies, Jean Jalong is everything, and the pure-blood family that holds a large amount of wealth will naturally be honored as guests by them. Lynn adjusted his collar and crossed the gate of Gringotts, and as he was about to cross the second silver gate, a line of engraved text appeared in front of him. Please come in, stranger, but be careful. What will happen to insatiable greed, just take, get for nothing, will surely receive the harshest punishment, so if you want to take it from our underground vault a wealth that never belonged to you, thief, you have received a warning, be careful not to summon treasure, but to seek retribution. Upon seeing this sentence, Lynn just laughed it off. Greed is insatiable, and this term is perfect for describing fairies. In Lynn's opinion, this sentence may be more reasonable as a warning to fairies. Moreover, the only thing that can protect wealth is strength. Only with sufficient strength can one protect what they want to protect. Otherwise, one can only sigh in despair at everything that has been plundered. After entering the Gringotts, Lynn handed out the metal key and then, led by a fairy, rode a small cart down the railway towards the ground. The small cart roared as the fierce cold wind blew past Lynn's face, and the next second, a waterfall poured down on him, turning him into a drowned rat. This waterfall that drips over Lynn's body is called Anti-Thief Waterfall, which has the function of washing away all spells and lifting magical disguise. Of course, camouflage methods such as human skin masks that have not undergone any magical treatment will not be discovered by the rebel falls. The fairy who controlled the small cart quickly snapped her fingers and used a spell to dry the water on Lynn's body before he and Gale next to him erupted. Not long after, a huge fire dragon appeared in their sight. The fire dragon sensed their arrival and attempted to spray flames to attack them, but the fairy controlling the small cart quickly pulled out a small metal tool from its embrace and shook it in the air. A loud and clear jingle sound sounded, and the dragon seemed to sense something particularly terrifying, emitting a hoarse roar before retreating back in succession. Dear guest, this animal will have a conditioned reflex towards something called ding-dang-pien. When it hears this sound, it will think of pain and retreat, afraid to attack us. The fairy explained to Lynn. Lynn nodded slightly, indicating a clear understanding. Quickly, they arrived at the vault held by the Roar family, and the fairy pressed her palm on the door of the vault, causing it to disappear. At this moment, the golden light seemed to have blinded Lynn's eyes. Although Lynn had some speculations about the property of the Roar family, he admitted to being shocked when he saw the pile of small mountains of gold and treasures everywhere. Lynn took out a bag that had been cast with the untraced stretching curse, and put thousands of golden crowns into it. Even so, the small hills in the vault showed no signs of decreasing. It can be seen how huge this small mountain built by Jean Jelong is. After withdrawing the money, Lynn and Gale returned to the ground smoothly and left Gringotts. After passing by the Florin Fosco ice cream shop and buying himself and Gale a glass of chocolate and crushed nut ice cream, Lynn arrived outside the Ollivander wand shop. This is a small and dilapidated shop that looks from the outside. The golden signboard on the door has peeled off, and it reads, Ollivander. A well-crafted wand made since 382 BC. In the shop window, there is a faded purple cushion with a wand on it. Lynn walked into the Ollivander wand shop and saw thousands of narrow boxes almost reaching the ceiling. Hello, may I ask if you are Mr. Ollivander, the master of cane making? Lynn asked an old man with a pair of light-colored eyes who appeared in front of them. Mr. Ollivander smiled and replied, Oh, yes. Good afternoon, little wizard. Lynn nodded and said, Hello, Mr. Ollivander. My name is Lynn Rawle and I'm here to buy a wand. Upon hearing Lynn's words, Mr. Ollivander was not surprised. He took out a long tape measure with a silver scale from his pocket and began measuring it for Lynn. Oh, of course. The little wizards who come to me are all here to get the wand that best suits them. All right, Mr. Roar, come, let me see. Which arm do you use the wand? Mr. Ollivander measured Lynn's size while speaking. Every Ollivander wand has a powerful magical substance, which is its essence, Mr. Ollivander said with a hint of pride. We use unicorn fur, phoenix tail feathers, and the heart nerves of a dragon. Each Ollivander wand is unique because there are no two completely identical magical creatures. Of course, if you use a wand that should belong to another wizard, it will never have such a good effect. Remember, Mr. Roar, it's the wand that chooses the wizard. Mr. Ollivander quickly measured the size and then shuttled between the shelves, selecting long boxes containing wands. Ah, yes, there are no useless wands, only useless wizards, right? Lynn casually spoke, his gaze focused on an unfinished wand deep in the wand shop. To be honest, he was very curious about the process of making the wand. Upon hearing Lynn's words, Mr. Ollivander's eyes lit up. He grabbed a long box that had just been selected and quickly approached Lynn, while his other hand grabbed Lynn's hands. You're absolutely right. Mr. All, I didn't expect you to have such a profound understanding of wands at such a young age. Mr. Ollivander was very pleased to say that he was clearly satisfied with his views being accepted. Seeing Mr. Ollivander react so strongly, Lynn also felt a bit embarrassed and touched his nose. Heaven and earth have a conscience, he was just playing a joke. Let's try this one, vine wood, phoenix tail feather, 11 inches long. It's quite flexible, you can wave it and give it a try. Mr. Ollivander handed Lynn a wand. Lynn grabbed the wand and swung it hard. I saw a beam of light burst out from the wand and hit a nearby shelf fiercely, then exploded. A fierce wave of air swept through, overturning several shelves around, and the shelf that was hit burst out with sawdust. Seeing this scene, Lynn couldn't help but jump his eyelids. Good guy, this power is comparable to the thunderbolt explosion unleashed by an adult wizard, right? Oh no. It's definitely not this one. Mr. Ollivander snatched the wand away, seemingly ignoring the shattered shelf. Instead, he frowned and took out a dark wand from another long box. Try it, ebony, unicorn fur, 8¼ inches. Mr. Ollivander said. Lynn had just grabbed the wand when a magical force suddenly exploded from his palm, bouncing the wand several meters away. Mr. Ollivander quickly picked up the wand with heartache and put it back in the long box. It's not this one either. Damn it. Mr. Ollivander seemed to be less confident in his judgment, so he went back to the shelves to pick and choose, and finally took off a long box wrapped in red silk. Try this, mahogany, 13¼ inches, the heartstring of a dragon. The material is a bit fragile, so be careful. Mr. Ollivander carefully handed a delicate-looking wand to Lynn. Lynn held on to this wand and felt a sense of bliss in his heart. He instinctively waved the wand in his hand. Shwa! In an instant, endless flames flew up from the ground, and this crimson flame with a hint of gold enveloped the entire Ollivander wand shop in an instant. The flames were reflected in Mr. Ollivander's frightened yet excited eyes. The raging flames seemed to be burning the sky and boiling the sea, enveloping Lynn, Gale, and Mr. Ollivander, but surprisingly, this seemingly terrifying flame did not cause any substantial harm to them, at most their skin felt a bit hot. Yes. That's it. Mr. Ollivander shouted with some excitement. At this moment, the flames in the sky dissipated, and strange red patterns quietly appeared on the body of this wand. The sharp-eyed Mr. Ollivander found this scene. He grabbed Lynn's hand holding the wand, looked at the wand and said in surprise, "Wait a minute, I seem to be dizzy. This is not an ordinary rosewood wand, but a wand made of branches cut from the magic tree after the grafting of rosewood and wootone wood. Moreover, the wootone wood grafted with mahogany is not the wootone wood of Muggle world, but a kind of wood with powerful power in the Oriental magic world. Wootone wood has a very high affinity for fire, which is no wonder that this wand will release such a powerful flame when it recognizes you as the master. Mr. Luoer, I believe you can have a very high achievement by grafting rosewood onto wootone wood, plus the heartstrings of dragons." Mr. Ollivander said happily. Usually, the heartstrings of dragons produce powerful wands and can cast the most magnificent magic, and the owners of wands made from dragon heartstrings often learn faster than other types of wand owners. In addition to the reputation of mahogany that can bring good luck to the owner in the legend, and the affinity of wootone wood to fire, it has been doomed that Lynn's talent will not be too bad. Of course, even if Lynn's magical talent is considered extremely poor, at least in terms of flame magic, Lynn must have a unique talent. Otherwise, he could not be accepted by this wood from the east. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Silent Spell, Extremely Strong Flame Affinity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Silent Spell, Extremely Strong Flame Affinity. Chinhui 7 golden gallons, thank you. After selecting the wand for Lynn, Mr. Ollivander said to him. Lynn gestured to Gale, who was holding a money bag, to make the payment. After purchasing the wand, Lynn took Gale to various stores located in Diagon Alley, such as Lycan Bookstore, Madame Morkin Robe Shop, and Patchy Crucible Shop, to purchase the necessary items for admission. However, Lynn did not go to the Pokémon or Eel Owl stores to buy pets because in his opinion, he currently does not have the need to keep pets, and Lynn does not necessarily have to buy his own owl when it comes to delivering messages. After all, at Roar Manor Lynn, one can choose the more efficient domestic elf Gale to deliver messages, while at Hogwarts Lynn, one can also borrow Hogwarts public owls to deliver messages from the Owl Shack on the top floor of the West Tower. After buying all the equipment, Lynn asked Gale to take his phantom back to Roar Manor. Mom, I'm back. Here's the key for you. Lynn returned the key to Gringotts to Roina. Roina put away the key and said to Lynn with a smile in her eyes, all right, go organize your equipment. I know you can't wait. Lynn chuckled. As Roina said, after purchasing these equipment, Lynn was a bit eager to go upstairs and organize them properly. Lynn returned to his room on the second floor and pulled out a small black backpack with a dark red pattern from under a spacious desk. The backpack was also cursed with a traceless stretch spell and contained space equivalent to 10 large suitcases. He took out the equipment he had previously purchased one by one from the original bag, and classified it according to magical books, potion materials, crucibles and other magical props, protective gloves and other magical equipment, as well as robes and other clothing. The first thing Lynn faced was a pile of magical potion materials. In addition to some essential magical materials for enrollment, Lynn also foresaw the purchase of raw materials such as fire ash snake eggs, horseradish, scallion bulbs, thyme tincture, bird snake eggshells, and rootin powder to make the tonic. Although Lynn currently does not know how to make fortunate, he still has a certain confidence that he can learn how to make fortunate in the future after experiencing chemical experiments in his past life. Moreover, even though these materials are expensive, they are just a drop in the bucket for the Roar family. You should know that many magic potion masters in the world of magic rely on countless gold gerunds to pile up. After organizing these potion materials into his backpack, Lynn began packing up other magical items. In order to prevent accidents in the troubled Hogwarts, Lynn purchased every magical item and equipment according to the highest specifications, and also bought an extra set as a backup. In addition, Lynn, a magic drug that can be used daily, such as white fresh essence, also prepared some for standby. After tidying up these, it's time for the textbooks needed for class. Lynn did not immediately put them in his backpack, but instead neatly placed them on the bookshelf. Although he is not a rolling king like Hermione, Lynn is still very willing to learn more magic before entering the wizarding world. After all, if you learn magic in advance, you can just mess it up in class. With this in mind, Lynn pulled out Standard Spell. Beginner, from the bookshelf. Lynn flipped open Standard Spell. Beginner, with one hand, and reached for his wand from his waist with the other. Fluorescent Flicker. Lumos, Lynn followed the spells and gestures from the book, while waving his wand and reciting the incantation of the glowing spell. The luminous curse can be said to be the simplest of all magic. Lynn was just trying it for the first time when he saw a faint white light appearing at the top of the wand. Although this light cluster looks very faint, it can barely illuminate Lynn's bedroom. Nox. Lynn repeated the spell to extinguish the light. The first time he cast magic, even with the most basic glowing spell, Lynn felt an extremely wonderful experience. Is this magic? Lynn's eyes seemed to contain a radiance. Wingardium Leviosa. Lynn waved his wand and aimed it at a feather pen in front of him. Under the control of magic, the feather pen jumped up and shook in the air before falling back to its original position. Obviously, Lynn's floating spell failed this time. However, Lynn was not discouraged by this, as it was only his first performance. Lynn continued to wave his wand, practicing the use of the floating spell. Half an hour passed, and Lynn was barely able to stably control a book floating in the air 2 or 3 meters above the ground. There is still a big gap between Ron's control of the giant monsters in the original work. Of course, this is not because Lynn's talent is not as high as Ron's, but because magic is idealistic. The reason why Ron can cast a floating spell level that even adult wizards may not be able to achieve is mainly because his desire is strong enough to make his floating spell miraculous in an instant. An afternoon passed quickly, and Lynn practiced several basic and familiar spells in his bedroom. At this moment, Lynn's standard spell. Beginner, flip to the page of the flame spell. Gale, help me tidy up the backyard. I need an open space to practice spells. Lynn snapped his fingers and summoned the domestic elf Gale, then gave him orders. Unlike life spells such as Luminous Curse and Floating Curse, aggressive spells like Flame Curse are something Lynn never dares to practice in his own bedroom. Otherwise, even if the castle uses protective magic, at least Lynn's own bed will be burned to ashes. Lynn doesn't want to sleep on the floor at night. Okay, young master. Gale bowed to Lynn and disappeared into place. Through the window, Lynn could see Gale's phantom appearing in the backyard, casting magic to clear some useless debris elsewhere. Due to the fact that Roar Manor has not been open to the public for over a decade, most of the gardens outside the castle have been abandoned. Although Gale was willing to spend time taking care of the estate every day, Lynn and Roina agreed that it was unnecessary, so Gale gave up. After Gale cleared an open space, Lynn came to this backyard. He pulled out his wand, and the feeling of blissful soul reappeared. Subconsciously, he waved his wand and recited a spell. Flame blazing. Incendio, there was almost no stagnation, and a large red flame spewed out from his wand with his heart, turning into a raging fire and burning in this backyard. The temperature of this flame is extremely high, making the surrounding air appear somewhat distorted. Seeing this, Lynn was somewhat shocked. The power of this flame curse may already be comparable to the flame curse cast by adult wizards. As the fire continued to spread and began to spread towards the backyard wall, Lynn waved his wand at a loss, wanting to retract the flames. But he seems to have forgotten that the flame curse can only release flames, without the function of retracting flames. But just then, a strange scene appeared. The flames that almost spread to the entire backyard, under Lynn's strong desire to retract them, slowly contracted towards the center and eventually dissipated into the air. This. Lynn was somewhat incredulous. In the moment he had just retracted the flame, he had a feeling that it seemed like a part of his body, capable of being waved like an arm. Flame blazing. Incendio, Lynn recited the spell again without believing it, summoning a large flame. This time, Lynn did not allow these flames to spread, but tried to control them, just as he had just controlled them to dissipate. Lynn waved his wand and was surprised to find that the flame he had just released moved with the movement of his wand. As his wand pointed in any direction, the flame spread in that direction. Is it because of the power of the mahogany to graft the Wudong wand? Lynn carefully examined the wand in his hand and found that as he controlled the flames, the crimson lines on the wand's body became even more vivid. Lynn's speed and control over the flame curse are unmatched by any other spell. Even a successful glowing spell cast at the beginning is not as powerful as a flame spell, which can directly rival an adult wizard. This strong control over fire may be derived from the flame affinity of Wudong wood, or from Lynn himself. After all, Lynn could be selected by the wand of Wudong wood grafted with mahogany, and his own flame affinity might not be much lower. Of course, this will only be verified when Lynn learns to cast without a wand in the future and cast the flame curse after leaving the wand. Lynn continued to practice the flame curse, and over time, he gradually became able to sense the flow of magic within his body when casting spells, an experience he could not have when casting other spells. 3 days flew by. Lynn learned many commonly used spell casting methods from Standard Spell Beginner, and the most significant improvement was naturally his flame spell. At this moment, Lynn appeared again in the backyard, different from before, intending to try the silent spell of the flame curse. After these 3 days of practice, Lynn has firmly remembered the flow trajectory of magic in his body when he cast the fire curse, which allows him to try to control the magic to move according to the previous flow trajectory without reciting the spell. Lynn felt the relatively weak magic in his body and slowly controlled them to flow towards the wand according to the flow trajectory of his own fire spell. This was a very slow process, but when Lynn tried to silently recite the curse of the flame curse in his heart, he was surprised to find that the process had been shortened by nearly 100 times. Lynn was only thinking about the spell of the fire curse in his heart and didn't recite it, but the flames spewed out smoothly from his wand and quickly burned in the backyard. Silent casting. Success. Lynn felt great joy in his heart. The flames unleashed by the silent curse, although slightly less powerful than before, still reach OWLS level. End of this chapter. Chapter 4, Platform 9, First Meeting of the Weasley Gemini. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4, Platform 9, First Meeting of the Weasley Gemini. The crimson flames were burning in the backyard, and Lynn could feel a wave of heat coming just a little closer. This flame doesn't seem to hurt me. As he gazed at the flames, such an idea suddenly appeared in Lynn's mind. Lynn tried to reach out and touch the burning flames in the yard, and a burning sensation came instantly. However, that was all. The blazing flames could not cause Lynn any greater harm. This is not the effect of the flame curse. Although the flame curse summons a magical flame, it is indiscriminate and can burn everything around it without restraint. However, when it faced Lynn, it seemed to have seen its owner and became obedient, even with a small flame jumping slightly at his fingertips after climbing onto Lynn's palm. Lynn was somewhat surprised by this. It should be noted that magic that can prevent flames from harming oneself is not uncommon. The first generation of the Black Demon King Grindelwald's fire shield can also use the flame for oneself. However, the fire shield is a fusion of the flame curse and the armor curse, and it already has a defensive magical ability. However, the flame curse released by Lynn is just an ordinary magical flame. Moreover, this flame only has no effect on Lynn, and when faced with other combustibles, it will still transform into a demon that devours everything. So is it my problem? Lynn fell into doubt. Lynn is not the kind of reckless man who is blindly confident and wants to explore alone without knowing anything, ultimately putting himself and the people around him in a desperate situation. When encountering unclear questions, he naturally sought advice from people with higher levels of magic. So, after extinguishing the flames in the backyard, Lynn returned to the castle and found his mother, Roina. After learning about Lynn's condition, Roina pondered for a moment and took out a beautiful willow wand from her arms. She raised her hand and waved a beautiful silent spell, and a flame suddenly appeared between the two. Roina's control over the flames was also extremely effective, as the flames were burning in the air without any tendency to spread. Try it, will this flame hurt you? Roina controlled the flames and moved towards Lynn, saying. Lynn reached out to touch the flames and shook his head, saying, like my flame curse, it can make me feel a burning sensation, but it cannot truly harm me. Roina nodded slightly and waved her wand again to extinguish the flames. Luoina looked thoughtfully at Lynn's dark red hair and said, since my flames cannot harm you, it indicates that it is not a problem with the flames, but with your own constitution. However, it is unknown whether the root of the problem comes from your bloodline or other magical powers. But as far as I know, neither the Rohr family nor my previous family has had such a precedent. Of course, there may also be intergenerational inheritance, and it is possible that the ancestors who possessed this power have not been recorded in the family history. At least for now, this kind of power is advantageous to you, isn't it? In the wizarding world, it's not uncommon for little wizards to possess certain magical abilities. Roina smiled softly and said softly. Upon hearing this, Lynn nodded slightly. As Roina said, it is not uncommon for wizards to possess special abilities in the wizarding world, such as the prophecy talent passed down from generation to generation by the Trelawney family, or the enchanting ability inherent in mixed-race dolls. Yes, my strong flame affinity allowed me to control the silent casting of the flame curse in just 3 days, while also preventing the flames from harming me. Lynn is no longer fixated on the source of his own talent. His extremely strong affinity for flames allows him to easily possess far superior skills in flame magic, and his goal is to unleash his talents as much as possible, allowing his special talents to be unleashed. Time passed as fast as Merlin took off her stockings, but in the blink of an eye, a month passed. On that day, Lynn put on his black backpack and, after bidding farewell to his mother Roina, asked Gale to perform a phantom shape-shifting to take him to King's Cross Station. The sound of an explosion sounded, and Lynn and Gale appeared in an empty corner of King's Cross Station. Lynn walked out of the pillar that covered his figure and saw the crowds coming and going around him. In order to avoid being discovered by Muggles, Gale immediately concealed his figure upon arriving here. After bidding farewell to Gale softly, Lynn carried his backpack, held his ticket, and walked towards the remembered Platform 9. Not far away, many boys or girls, accompanied by their parents, are pushing small carts and crashing towards the partition between platforms 9 and 10. Most of these children share a common feature, which is that their carts often have a cage containing owls. Standing next to this partition was an adult man, and Lynn could vaguely see a wand inserted around his waist. It is obvious that this adult man is the wizard responsible for maintaining order here, and this area has been cast a clear confusion spell, with Muggles on both sides turning a blind eye to the strange scene happening here. The little wizards passed through the walls one by one, and some of the first-year Muggle freshmen, while pushing their small carts through the partition, unexpectedly ran with a sense of death as if they were returning home. This made Lynn constantly look sideways. Due to his luggage being packed in a backpack that had been cast with the untraced stretching curse, Lynn appeared effortless and freehand as he passed through the partition wall. On the other side of Platform 9, Lynn saw a deep red retro-style steam locomotive parked next to the platform crowded with little wizards. The sign hanging on the train reads, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Looking at this line of text and recalling the speed of the train in the original work, Lynn couldn't help but chuckle softly. It is truly the Hogwarts Express. With this thought in mind, Lynn boarded the train and walked straight to a private compartment near the end of the train. Lynn sat down against the window and took out an old-looking notebook from his backpack. This is a note by Roina about flame magic when she was still studying at Hogwarts. This notebook, even the pages of the book have turned yellow, is a treasure in Lynn's eyes. Through learning from his mother's experience, he has been able to make flames burn freely in air without any combustibles, and control the size and shape of the flames without any sound. Excuse me. Are there any available seats in this private room? At this moment, a cheerful voice came from the door of the private room. Only 2 red-haired boys came in from the box door. The 2 red-haired boys looked almost identical, apparently twin brothers. The chest of the wizard robes they put on had the badge of Gryffindor College. At the moment he saw them, Lynn already knew their identities in his heart. George Weasley and Fred Weasley. Red-haired, Gemini, Gryffindor. These distinctive features make their identities clear at a glance. All the seats here are empty, just sit anywhere. Lynn closed his notes and said to the 2 of them. Fred thanked him and then worked hard with George to push the suitcase containing luggage towards the corner of the private room. Wingardium Leviosa. Seeing both of them blushing, Lynn took out his wand from his arms and kindly helped them move the suitcase to the corner of the private room with a floating spell. Upon seeing this scene, Fred and George were both stunned. "Thank you very much, buddy. If it weren't for your skill, we would have forgotten that we are wizards." George smiled and said to Lynn, taking out his wand to clean his dusty robe. Fred also used a cleansing spell on himself, and then the two sat opposite Lynn. "Fred Weasley, nice to meet you." "George Weasley, nice to meet you." The Weasley twins reached out their hands to Lynn at the same time and said. Lynn held their hands and smiled, saying, "Lynn Rawle, nice to meet you." Upon hearing this, the two of them were momentarily stunned before showing a relieved expression on their faces. George said, "I was just thinking about how skillfully you could use the floating spell, even though you are a new student who has not yet enrolled. I didn't expect you to be the little wizard of the Roar family." In general, young wizards from pure blood families often come into contact with magic earlier than their peers, so George thought Lynn had been learning magic for a long time. Lynn smiled and shook his head, not telling the other person that he had only been exposed to magic for 2 months. Lynn's gaze turned to the Gryffindor badge on their chests and he said, "Are you all students of Gryffindor College? I don't know which college I will enter then." Fred said, "Yes, we are all second-year students in Gryffindor." At this moment, George glanced at Lynn's notebook and said thoughtfully, "As far as I know, the people of the Roar family are all graduates of Slytherin, and those with the Roar family bloodline are likely to enter Slytherin College. However, if it were Roar, you could also go to Ravenclaw College." Fred nodded and said, "Yes, most diligent little wizards like you, Rawle, would go to Ravenclaw." Upon hearing this, Lynn glanced at the unfinished notes at hand and burst into laughter. "Lynn, just call me Lynn." Lynn N said with goodwill. After recognizing the meaning of making friends in Lynn's words, Fred and George exchanged a glance and said to Lynn in unison, "Lynn, just call our names too." Just as the three were about to continue their conversation, the door of the private room was pushed open again. A chubby woman with a smiling face and dimples walked in with a cart full of snacks and said, "Darling, do you want to buy any food from the car?" Lynn looked at the cart, where a large amount of magical food was loaded onto it, including snacks such as BB-flavored beans, Blow Baby Super Bubble Candy, Chocolate Frog, Crucible-shaped cake, Licorice Wand, and more. Even for a relatively niche pile of cockroaches, Lynn can still see a few boxes. However, the constantly crawling cockroaches in the box made Lynn unable to appreciate them. Perhaps only a certain old bee has a special fondness for cockroach piles, a strange dessert. Faced with a load of food, the Weasley twins fell silent. They haven't made much money yet by inventing magic products on this timeline, so they are a bit shy. 3 chocolate frogs, please." Fred hesitated for a moment and counted out some copper gnats from his pocket one by one, handing them to the chubby woman. If there were only the two of them in the private room, Fred would choose to spend this time with the sandwich prepared by Mrs. Weasley. But they made new friends, and Fred still hoped to entertain each other with food from the magical world. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Alchemy, Sources of Magic Products. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Alchemy, Sources of Magic Products. Except for the cockroach pile, take 3 servings of other snacks each. Lynn saw the predicament of the Weasley twins, and their actions moved him a bit. So he generously grabbed a handful of gold from the purse that had cast the Stretchless curse, intending to become a nouveau riche like next year's Harry Potter. The chubby woman looked at Lynn with some surprise, then took 3 portions of each snack except for the cockroach pile and handed them to Lynn. She also took 3 chocolate frogs for the Weasley twins. "Let's eat together. I can't finish all this." After watching the chubby woman leave the private room, Lynn smiled and said to the Weasley twins. Fred and George exchanged a glance. Fred took a ZZB candy from the snack pile and put it in his mouth. While chewing, he kept saying, "Hiss, how sweet. I bet Professor Dumbledore likes this." George handed one of their chocolate frogs to Lynn. Lynn was also polite, tore open the packaging, grabbed the back foot of the chocolate frog that wanted to escape with one hand, and threw it into his mouth. After finishing the chocolate frog, Lynn pulled out another card from the packaging. On the card was a man with light blue eyes and short black hair. The man's lenses refracted two white lights, making him look very serious, but his deep eyes carried a hint of melancholy. Lynn flipped over the card and looked at the text on its back. Voldemort Green, a famous French alchemist and the personal disciple of the great alchemist Nicole Lemay. Mr. Green's well-known contributions include: in 1945, he participated in the arrest of the Black Wizard Grindelwald, invention of alchemy product forbidden magic stone. His teacher Nicole Lemay made a breakthrough in alchemy. After reading this passage, Lynn's eyes froze. This Mr. Wallacen Green is a character outside of the original work, and his involvement in the capture of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald is also inconsistent with Lynn's understanding of the original work. Of course, the magical world is a complete world, not something that can be fully explored in just one novel. It is not surprising that there are powerful wizards in the magical world that are not recorded in books. However, the alchemy product Forbidden Stone, invented by Wallacen Green, made Lynn wary. At this moment, Fred and George also tore open their chocolate frog packaging, wailing that their cards were all Dumbledore. After seeing the card in Lynn's hand, George said with great interest, "Mr. Wallacen Green. This card belongs to a relatively rare kind. Lynn, you're lucky." Seeing the two of them looking at him, Lynn asked directly, "Do you know Mr. Green? I want to know what kind of item the alchemy product Forbidden Stone is among his contributions." Looking at Lynn's nervous expression, the Weasley twins burst into laughter. After a while, Fred stroked his chest and explained to Lynn, who looked at him with a question mark, "The alchemy product Forbidden Stone invented by Mr. Wallacen Green has a certain ability to suppress magical power. After it was launched by him, this alchemy product was once sought after by magical ministries of various countries and used to protect important parts of the Ministry of Magic, such as the Department of Mysterious Affairs of our British Ministry of Magic. However, the ability of the Forbidden Stone to suppress magical power is not as powerful as imagined. A Forbidden Stone the size of a ghost flying ball can only reduce the ability of wizards within a range of 10 meters to cast magic by less than 10%. It has no effect on a powerful wizard like Professor Dumbledore." After receiving an explanation, Lynn suddenly realized. Yes, if the efficacy of this so-called forbidden magic stone is too powerful, it may not be the pursuit of magic ministries from various countries, but rather a ban. At this moment, George smiled and said to Lynn, "You've also seen the power of alchemy products. All of this can be attributed to alchemy. The shorthand feather pens commonly used by journalists, and the dung balls from the Joker's shop are all magical products made through alchemy." Lynn nodded slightly. He had an impression of these things. He remembered that the Weasley twins seemed to have opened a Weasley magic workshop later on. Fred, on the other hand, said somewhat distressed, "We have long wanted to learn alchemy, but alchemy is an elective course that only 6th and 7th graders can take, and ancient texts like Niven also require 3rd grade students to take it." George sang to the side and said, "So we borrowed a jar of ZZB candy from 6th grade Ravenclaw, the Introduction to Ancient Magic Scripts, Magic Scripts Dictionary, and Magic Phonetic Table. We plan to self-study ancient runic in advance and then learn alchemy." Fred said, "George and I have both decided that after learning these magic texts, we must first improve the dung ball and give Filch a little shock. Oh, by the way, Filch is the administrator of Hogwarts." Lynn didn't expect that the Weasley twins would start learning alchemy so early. However, this is not surprising. After all, when Harry Potter enrolled, the Weasley twins were already able to improve dung bombs, and they were only in 3rd grade at that time. After being introduced by the Weasley twins, Lynn realized that he was also interested in alchemy. So Lynn and Shuan asked, "Can I also read the books you borrowed? I also want to have some exposure to ancient Runi script in advance." The Weasley twins agreed without hesitation. Fred walked to the corner of the private room and found 3 somewhat worn-out magic books from his luggage on the ground, which were exactly what George had previously referred to as A Brief Introduction to Ancient Magic Scripts, Magic Scripts Dictionary, and Magic Phonetic Alphabet. Lynn took the magic book from his hand, and as a token of gratitude, Lynn also lent the notebook to the 2 of them, which recorded his mother's understanding of the flame curse. This is some of my mother's understanding of the fire curse when she was studying at Hogwarts. Lynn explained to the Weasley twins. Fred took the notebook and joked, Lynn, with this notebook as an aid, your flame curse should be quite powerful, right? Lynn nodded and took out his wand from his arms, gently waving it. With a beautiful silent spell, a spherical flame appeared out of thin air between them, jumping up and down. Feeling the scorching sensation, both of them twitched their lips. Fred never expected that Lynn's flame curse would be so powerful. Heaven and earth have a conscience. He was just joking just now. Silent casting, this is silent casting. Perhaps even adult wizards who graduated from Hogwarts are rarely able to cast spells silently. Fred and George shouted wildly in their hearts. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Branch Ceremony. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Branch Ceremony. It's just a flame spell, I'm no different from you when I cast other spells. Lynn shook his head and said. Fred and George just nodded, without breaking the clay pot and asking the whole question. This kind of talent for a specific magical power often comes from within one's bloodline, which involves personal privacy. Fred and George did not have the idea of exploring the privacy of others. Quickly, the long journey was spent in the study of 3 people, accompanied by the sunset, and the train also slowed down. The train will arrive at Hogwarts in 5 minutes. Please leave your luggage on the train and we will take it to the school for you. The broadcast echoed in the private room. The Weasley twins immediately closed their notebooks on the table and took out their wands from their arms. The wizard robe is flying. The wizard robe is flying. The 2 of them simultaneously cast the flying curse and summoned their wizard robes from a pile of luggage in the corner of the private room. As soon as the Weasley twins turned around, the wizard robe was draped over them. Lynn also closed his Introduction to Ancient Magic Scripts and took out the wizard robe from his backpack, using a floating spell to control it and wrap it around him. Lynn, did your backpack cast the Stretching Without a Trace spell? Fred realized that Lynn had no other luggage besides the backpack in his hand, so he asked curiously. Lynn nodded. At this moment, the train stopped and the little wizards rushed towards the car door, pushing and shoving. The Weasley twins also pulled Lynn and squeezed towards the car door. Quickly, the 3 of them left the train and got off to a small, black platform. The cold air that hit their faces made the Weasley twins shiver. Not far away, a lamp flickered above the little wizards, while a tall figure shouted loudly, Freshman! Freshman, come here! This is a tall man with a big beard and a moleskin jacket. His extraordinary figure makes him stand out among the small wizards. Yes, this tall gentleman is Rupert Hagrid, the hunting ground guard at Hogwarts. Hurry up, I'll see you in the castle auditorium later. Fred patted Lynn's shoulder and said with a smile. Lynn bid farewell to the Weasley twins and headed towards Hagrid. I'm Rupert Hagrid, the keykeeper and gamekeeper of Hogwarts. You guys keep up. Hagrid said in his rough voice. The little wizards followed Hagrid down a steep and narrow path, surrounded by pitch black, and the starlight in the sky was not enough to illuminate the road here. Upon seeing this, Lynn gently waved his wand, and a small flame rose out of thin air amidst the screams of the young wizards, steadily hovering in the air, illuminating their path forward. Hagrid, holding the dim oil lamp, was stunned and then praised, beautiful flame curse. Little wizard, what's your name? Lynn bowed elegantly to Hagrid and said, Lynn Roll, Mr. Hagrid. Hagrid patted Lynn's shoulder heavily as a sign of encouragement, and the terrifying force almost made Lynn fall. Due to Hagrid's distance from Lynn just now, he just thought that Lynn's chanting voice was relatively low, and did not know that Lynn was silently casting spells, otherwise he would never be so calm. At the end of this narrow path, there is a black lake. On the slope across the lake stands a towering and ancient castle, with towering spires and windows flickering under the faint starlight. Rows of small boats are moored on the shore of the lake, all of which are used to welcome new life. There can't be more than 4 people on each boat. Hagrid pointed to these small boats and shouted to the little wizards. Upon hearing this, the little wizards immediately crowded towards the small boat. Lynn stood still, waiting for the other little wizards to board the ship before extinguishing the flames in the air and sharing a boat with Hagrid, who also landed last. The small boat rode over the mirror-like surface of the lake, heading towards the towering castle. When the front boat approached a cliff, Hagrid shouted loudly, "Bow your head." In fact, apart from Hagrid himself, no one else would touch the cliff even if they didn't bow their heads. Soon, a group of young wizards arrived at the castle, and Lynn also returned to the team of these first-year students. Hagrid walked forward and forcefully knocked on the oak door of the castle 3 times with his massive fist. The door was opened, and a witch wearing an emerald green robe stood at the door with a serious expression on her face. "The freshmen are all here, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid." Professor McGonagall nodded and fully opened the door, letting the little wizards in. Professor McGonagall led the little wizards along the stone-paved floor of the castle and eventually arrived at an empty room. "Welcome to Hogwarts," Professor McGonagall said. "The opening banquet is about to begin, but before you take your seats in the auditorium, you need to determine which college you are each entering. Dividing is an important ceremony because during your time in school, the college is like your home in Hogwarts. You need to attend classes with other classmates in the college, stay in the college dormitory together, and spend your spare time in the college's public lounge. The names of the 4 colleges are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each college has its own glorious history and has nurtured outstanding wizards. During your time at Hogwarts, your outstanding performance will earn your college extra points, while any violation will cause your college to lose points. At the end of the year, the college with the highest score will receive the College Cup, which is a high honor. I hope that no matter which college you are assigned to, you will bring honor to your college." After delivering the welcome speech, Professor McGonagall led everyone through the hall and then through a double door to the auditorium. Arrived the world's tallest city, Litong, auditorium. Lynn silently thought to himself and arrived at the end of the team. At this moment, the young wizards from each grade of the 4 colleges had already gathered around 4 long tables, with thousands of candles floating above them. On the velvet black ceiling, stars twinkled, making the entire auditorium even more beautiful and magnificent. Professor McGonagall took a few steps forward and placed a pointed wizard hat on a 4-legged stool. This hat is patched, worn for a long time, and dirty like a piece of junk just picked up from a garbage dump. This hat naturally determines the branch hat that each little wizard belongs to. I saw this branch hat wriggling around in this auditorium like no one else, and the big crack like a big mouth made an unpleasant song. The branch ceremony has begun. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Branch Slytherin, this year's defense against the dark arts teaching. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Branch Slytherin, Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts. This year, after the singing ended, Professor McGonagall walked up with a roll of parchment in his hand that recorded all the names of the new students. "Whoever I call now, put on the branch hat." Professor McGonagall shouted, "Phi Elsa." A little girl ran out of the queue and obediently sat on the corner stool. Professor McGonagall placed the division hat on her head. A few seconds later, the branch cap lifted and shouted, "Ravenclaw." The little girl named Faye Aisha immediately stood up nervously, and then stumbled towards the second table on her left, which belonged to Ravenclaw College, under Professor McGonagall's nod. After Phi Elsa took his seat, Professor McGonagall recited the name of the next little wizard. Thus, the branch ceremony proceeded in an orderly manner. Due to Lynn's surname Roar having the initial letter, R, which is later in the alphabet, it took nearly 20 minutes for Professor McGonagall to call out his name. Lynn Roll. Professor McGonagall spoke loudly. Lynn walked up and sat on the corner stool, putting the branch hat on his head. Closing his eyes, Lynn could hear a faint voice ringing in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. I can see that you have great courage, which most Gryffindor cannot match, and you are very talented. Listening to the words of the Sorting Hat, Lynn was not surprised. After all, if he didn't have the courage, how could he have died in the fire to save an unfamiliar child? However, according to the meaning of the branch hat, do you want to arrange yourself in Gryffindor? You should know that besides the Weasley family, only Sirius Black is probably assigned to Gryffindor as a member of the pure blood family. But I can also see that you have enough loyalty, you won't betray any friends, and in terms of love, you may be steadfast. The Sorting Hat continued to speak, this time referring to the Hufflepuff traits possessed by Lynn. Upon hearing the Sorting Hat's evaluation of his love, Lynn couldn't help but blush and feel embarrassed. Please, since I have been a single dog for 2 lifetimes, why should I be so confident in him with a love hat? I can also see that you seem to have great wisdom. Whether it's your learning ability or thinking ability, you far surpass most Ravenclaw, but this is not your innate ability, but a result of accumulated knowledge. This time, the Sorting Hat talked about Lynn's Ravenclaw traits. Upon hearing what the Sorting Hat said, Lynn couldn't help but chuckle in his heart. After 16 years of exam-oriented education, his learning ability and other aspects were naturally not comparable to those of these British little wizards who were prone to flaunting their skills. Even Ravenclaw, who has a strong academic atmosphere, may not be as capable as he was in his past life. However, although the Sorting Hat could reveal his Ravenclaw traits, he was confident that the Sorting Hat would not actually assign himself to Ravenclaw. After all, compared to the traits of other colleges he possesses, it is probably not surprising that he has a talent that has been accumulated and developed over time. At the end, I can see your immense ambition. Perhaps you disdain power, but your desire for power and victory surpasses all the little wizards I have seen today. You are not bound by worldly constraints, and in order to achieve your goals, you may choose no means. The words spoken by the Sorting Hat silenced Lynn. Yes, as the Sorting Hat said, his thirst for victory is indelible. Born in a mountainous area in his past life, his desire to step out of the mountains and make a name for himself has always been a part of his life. He will give up everything he has for an opportunity, and he will also be eliminated by his teacher helping his relatives through the back door. He will take advantage of the night to come and beat him to the hospital. Perhaps only those born in the mud will have the most genuine desire for victory. In this life, Lynn came from the Roar family, one of the holy 28 pure blood families, but his innate desire will not be extinguished by a simple reincarnation. Interesting, really interesting. You are the most difficult little wizard I have ever chosen in the past decade. You are brave, kind, yet ruthless, and have the ultimate desire. You are steadfast, loyal, and have a smart mind and calm thinking. You are like a collection of contradictions. Where should I assign you? You possess almost every college's characteristics, and are not inferior to ordinary people. It's difficult for me to assign you to one of these colleges while ignoring the other 3. The Sorting Hat swayed unsteadily, it had never seen such a strange little wizard before. Slytherin. Lynn spoke hoarsely. Every trait described by the Sorting Hat is a reflection of his past life, as if he had repeated that brief life in just 2.5 minutes. Whether it was the courage to jump into the fire, the perseverance during his studies, or the sincerity in his interactions with friends, they were just a fleeting moment in his life. Only the thirst for victory that fits Slytherin's traits is something that runs through his entire life. Do you want to go to Slytherin? Alright, alright. After all, you are also a member of the Roar family. Since your ambition is here, then I will follow your heart. Perhaps Lynn's traits are indeed quite prominent, perhaps Lynn comes from a pure-blooded family, or perhaps it is really difficult for the Sorting Hat to separate his college. After learning about Lynn's ideas, the Sorting Hat agreed to his request without hesitation. Slytherin. The Branch Hat shouted loudly. Opening his eyes, Lynn heard thunderous applause from Slytherin's long table and also saw the surprised gazes of the crowd. When Lynn sat down at the Slytherin long table, a new student who had been assigned to Slytherin before Lynn immediately approached and said, "Wow, Roar. It took a whole 2.5 minutes for the Sorting Hat to be assigned to your college. This is really rare. Oh, by the way, my name is Irving Foley. Nice to meet you." Lynn nodded and said, "Lynn Rawle, nice to meet you." After speaking, Lynn had no intention of continuing the conversation and turned his gaze to the teacher's seat. Sitting in the teacher's seat were all familiar faces from Lynn's past life, except for the Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts. "Is that Mr. Wallison Green?" Lynn's pupils slightly dilated, and he didn't expect to see Mr. Green's chocolate frog card earlier on the train. Now he has seen Mr. Green himself. At this moment, Lynn's spare time saw the Weasley twins. It was obvious that the Weasley twins were also surprised that Mr. Green was the professor of this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts, and their eyes seemed to be slightly excited. Request for collection, recommended tickets, tips, and monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Banquets and Slytherin Dormitory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Banquets and Slytherin Dormitory. Can it be said that the reason why the Weasley twins later achieved such a high level of alchemy was because they learned alchemy from this Mr. Wallison Green this year? Lynn's expression moved slightly. So, can I also learn alchemy from this famous French alchemist? You should know that the Philosopher's Stone, which can prolong the life of Nicole Lemmy and his wife by more than 600 years, is also an alchemy product. Although Lynn was not interested in extending his lifespan, the power of alchemy fascinated him. After all, the Philosopher's Stone is alchemy, but alchemy is not a Philosopher's Stone. At this moment, Mr. Green, Professor Green seemed to have caught Lynn's gaze. He nodded slightly towards Lynn, showing a kind smile. Upon seeing this scene, Lynn couldn't help but glance at Professor Snape with a zombie face next to Professor Green. Why is there such a big difference between people when they are all gloomy men? Lynn thought so. Soon, the branch ceremony came to an end. Albus Dumbledore, the principal of Hogwarts, stood up and looked at the young wizards with a smile on his face. He extended his arms and said happily, "Welcome. Welcome everyone to Hogwarts to start a new academic year. Before the banquet starts, I want to say a few words. That's fool. Cry your nose. Residue. Twist. Thank you all." As Professor Dumbledore's words fell, applause thundered in the auditorium. Not a word of nonsense. Lynn was immediately moved, which reminded him of a past high school graduation ceremony where the principal had to shake hands with each student to hand out a graduation certificate holster. Thousands of people took turns handing it out, causing Lynn to wait under the stage for more than 3 hours. At this moment, the plate in front of Lynn suddenly filled with food, including beef, roasted chicken, pork chops, lamb chops, sausages, steak, boiled potatoes, roasted potatoes, French fries, Yorkshire pudding, pea sprouts, carrots, gravy, tomato sauce, and perhaps due to an old bee, there were candies such as mint and hard candy on the plate. Just as Lynn was about to start, the ghosts from various colleges suddenly emerged. Next to Slytherin's long table was a terrifying ghost with staring eyes, haggard and covered in silver blood stains on his robe. This was exactly Slytherin's Academy ghost blood man Barrow. Good guy, does this still allow people to eat? Lynn felt a bit helpless, standing at the dining table covered in blood. It was really unbearable. Lynn tried hard to ignore the bloodman Barrow, and then tried the steak and roasted potatoes on the plate, which surprisingly tasted good. After the little wizards were all full, the food on the plate was replaced by some desserts. A wide variety of desserts are available, including ice cream, apple pie, syrup fruit pies, chocolate muffins, fried jam donuts, wine-soaked jam pudding, strawberries, jelly, and rice pudding. Lynn picked up 2 cups of ice cream and started eating them. Finally, the plates became clean again, and the auditorium regained its original silence from the noise during meals. Oh, now that everyone has eaten and drunk enough, I want to say a few more words to everyone. At the beginning of the semester, I want to remind everyone of a few things to pay attention to. First grade students should be aware that the forest area on the school site is not open to any students. Students from other grades should also remember this. Professor Dumbledore's shining eyes scanned towards the Weasley twins, clearly indicating that they had been running towards the Forbidden Forest in their first grade. Furthermore, Mr. Filch, the administrator, also asked me to remind everyone not to use magic in the hallway during breaks. Finally, the review of Quidditch players will be held in the second week of this semester. Students who are interested in participating in the college representative team, please contact Ms. Hawk. Now, before everyone goes to bed, let's sing the school song together. Professor Dumbledore spoke loudly, revealing a smile. But Lynn found that all the professors except for Professor Dumbledore froze their smiles upon hearing this sentence. I saw Professor Dumbledore waving his wand, and a long golden ribbon twisted and coiled like a snake, creating rows of golden texts that were the Hogwarts school anthem. Everyone chooses their favorite tune, Professor Dumbledore said. Prepare, sing. Under the leadership of Professor Dumbledore, a group of little wizards quickly sang, and some first-year students were initially a bit shy, but soon integrated into it. Hogwarts, 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 please teach us knowledge, whether we are balding elderly people or children with knee injuries, our minds can accept some interesting things. Because now our brains are empty, filled with air, dead flies, and trivial matters, teach us some valuable knowledge, give us back what we have forgotten, you just need to do your best, and leave the rest to ourselves, we will work hard to learn until it turns into manure. Everyone sings to different tunes, which puts the entire auditorium in a state of chaos and chaos. No wonder other professors have such helpless expressions. Among them, the Weasley twins sang with the melody of the funeral march, while Lynn sang in a strange form of singing, dancing, and rap, which made Professor Dumbledore feel a bit excited. Music, Professor Dumbledore said with tears in his eyes after the song ended, more charming than everything we do here. It's time for bed now, everyone go back to the dormitory. So, the heads of each college led their first-year students towards the direction of the college dormitory, and a group of little radishes followed behind the heads, looking like eagles catching chicks. Slytherin's dormitory was at the bottom of Black Lake, and Lynn followed the large army downstairs to a hidden stone door hidden in a stone wall. Remember, the password for this week is Holy. The prefect said to the crowd, and saw the stone door hidden inside the stone wall slowly open, revealing the public lounge inside. Slytherin's public lounge is a low basement with rough stones on the walls and ceiling. Round, green lights are chained and hung from the ceiling. Not far away was a huge glass, through which Lynn could see the view of Black Lake. This huge glass made the entire Slytherin public lounge look like an aquarium. Lynn followed the guide and arrived at his own dormitory. The bed in Slytherin's dormitory was a traditional 4-poster bed with a green silk curtain hanging on it, and the bedspread was embroidered with silver thread. Request for collection, recommended tickets, tips, and monthly tickets. Thank you for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Invitation of the Weasley Gemini. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Invitation of the Weasley Gemini. In this dormitory, only the 4-pillar bed in the northwest corner had Lynn's backpack placed in the train compartment, while the other 3 beds were very clean and had no luggage. This surprised Lynn a bit. From the recent separation ceremony, it seems that I was the last one to enter Slytherin. Is it true that I am the only one in this dormitory? Lynn thought to himself. A dormitory can accommodate 4 little wizards. If the number of little wizards assigned to Slytherin in front of Lynn is exactly a multiple of 4, then Lynn, who has just emerged, will naturally be assigned to a new dormitory. That is to say, Lynn can enjoy a whole dormitory alone. As for the remaining 3 beds, it is estimated that they will be left for the 3 newly enrolled Slytherin freshmen after the graduation ceremony next year. The night passed quickly. The first class in the morning was Professor McGonagall's deformation class. Lynn got up early to avoid being late and rushed towards the deformation classroom after finishing breakfast. However, these moving stairs in the castle really gave him a big trouble, and it took Lynn almost half an hour to arrive at the deformation classroom from the auditorium. Lynn finally understood why Harry and Ron were late for the first class in the original work. It's possible to spend half a day on this staircase without any luck or strength. This deformation class was taught by Gryffindor and Slytherin together. When Lynn arrived at the classroom, a tabby cat was sitting upright on the podium. Lynn knew that the tabby cat was in Professor McGonagall's animagus form, so he bowed to the tabby cat and then sat down in his seat. This made Professor McGonagall couldn't help but take a second glance at Lynn. When the bell for class rang, the tabby cat suddenly leaped forward and transformed back into Professor McGonagall's humanoid form in the air, causing a group of young wizards to exclaim in surprise. Professor McGonagall took 2 steps forward and seemed satisfied with the reaction of the little wizards. She said, "I'm glad to see you here, and I'm also glad that no one was late for our first shape-shifting class. Perhaps some people have already previewed shape-shifting, while others know nothing about it. But regardless of whether you have learned shape-shifting in advance or not, I want to emphasize one thing first, which is the basic law of shape-shifting, the GAMP's basic shape-shifting law. The basic transformation rule of GAMP tells us that wizards can transform objects or create something. However, it is worth mentioning that there are 5 exceptions here, one of which is food. We cannot create delicious dishes out of thin air, but if we know where the food is, we can summon it. If we have some food on hand, we can also cast spells to change or increase it. Remember, never try to turn other items into food. There was once a wizard who turned a wooden table into bread and ate it because he couldn't find food. Later, he died because the magic of maintaining the transformation spell expired over time, causing the bread to turn back into a wooden table in his body. Therefore, when people found his body was full of wooden thorns. Metamorphosis is the most complex and dangerous magic in the course you learned at Hogwarts. No one should be naughty or mischievous in my class, otherwise I will invite him out and permanently refuse him to enter my metamorphosis class. Moreover, if this wrong behavior causes casualties to other wizards, he may even face trial by the Ministry of Magic. Professor McGonagall said very seriously. Everyone suppressed their voices, and they were all frightened by the consequences Professor McGonagall had said. At this moment, Lynn suddenly raised his hand and said, "Professor McGonagall, if a wizard has enough magic to sustain his transformation spell until he ages or dies, wouldn't the transformed food be able to exist in the form of food forever without causing harm to the wizard?" Upon hearing this, Professor McGonagall shook his head and said, "Lynn, the question you raised is very good. But I want to clarify one thing, which is that the magic required to maintain a shape-shifting spell will gradually increase over time. As far as I know, no wizard's magic can sustain a shape-shifting spell for hundreds of years, even Professor Dumbledore cannot." Lynn nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that the relationship between the magic and time consumed by maintaining the transformation spell was not a proportional function, but an exponential function. Professor McGonagall continued, "Not only that, the magic required to maintain the transformation technique also depends on the size of the object. If the transformed object is large, the duration will be shorter. On the contrary, if the transformed object is small, the duration will be longer. And what I need you to do in this deformation class is try to transform a match into a needle." Professor McGonagall said and handed each person a match. Lynn took out his wand from his arms and whispered a spell. Under the control of the shape-shifting technique, the match gradually undergoes changes. Firstly, its end becomes thinner and thinner, and its entire body gradually shines with silver light. After completing the external changes, Lynn attempted to change the texture of the match from wood to metal. No matter how Lynn used his mind to control this match, he could only make it look more like a silver needle on the outside, but still a piece of wood on the inside. But even so, Lynn's progress is already the fastest in this classroom. Professor McGonagall walked over and saw the match that had turned into a silver needle in front of Lynn. He couldn't help but praise it, saying, "Well done. Although not completely successful, it's already great to achieve this level of transformation for the first time. For your excellent transformation technique, Slytherin added 2 points." "Thank you, Professor," Lynn said. In the remaining time of this deformation class, Lynn continued to try to change the texture of the match and finally completed the transformation before class ended, turning the match into a silver needle completely. Undoubtedly, this allowed Lynn to win 2 points for Slytherin. After leaving the transformation classroom, Lynn walked towards the potion classroom located underground at Hogwarts Castle. While passing through the auditorium, Lynn met Fred and George. "Hey, brother." Fred walked towards Lynn and patted his shoulder. George said beside him, "We didn't expect you to actually enter Slytherin. After all, in our eyes, you don't look like those little snakes at all." Lynn shrugged and said truthfully, "The Sorting Hat said I possessed the traits of all 4 colleges, but in the end, I was assigned to Slytherin." Lynn did not tell the two that he wanted to go to Slytherin himself. Fred said with regret, "It's a pity that you couldn't come to Gryffindor." George said, "It's okay, Fred. After all, we're still good friends, aren't we? By the way, Lynn, are you free tonight?" Fred continued, "If you have time, let's meet in the prize display room after the dinner tonight. We have something good to show you. Seeking collection, seeking recommended tickets, seeking rewards, seeking monthly tickets. Ask for everything that can be asked for. Thank you all." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Professor Green's Practical Course. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Professor Green's Practical Course. Lynn N. nodded and said, "Of course. What kind of good thing is it? Is it a new toy from the Zoko joke shop?" Fred chuckled and said, "What new toy? It's even more exciting than a toy." George said, "See you tonight." After bidding farewell to the Weasley twins, Lynn came to the underground potion classroom. This is a large underground classroom that can accommodate at least 20 young wizards for classes. The shelves on the walls of the classroom are filled with various glass jars containing animal specimens soaked in solution. There is also a magic material storage cabinet in the classroom, which stores various raw materials that students of different grades may use when making magic potions. The environment of the potion class is much colder than other classrooms in the castle, and it is unclear whether it is due to the dim lighting here or the terrifying animal specimens on the shelves. Bang! Suddenly, the classroom of the potion class was suddenly opened, and Professor Snape, dressed in a black robe, strode in like a built-that-in blower. "You are here to learn the precise science and strict craftsmanship of preparing this potion," Professor Snape spoke, his voice almost slightly higher than a whisper, but everyone could hear every word he said. "Since there is no foolish wand waving here, many of you wouldn't believe it's magic. I don't expect you to truly understand the beauty of the slow simmering crucible emitting white smoke and fragrant wafts. You won't truly understand the magical power of the liquid flowing into people's blood vessels, which makes people's hearts flutter and their wills wander. However, for those very few intelligent people, I can teach you how to confuse your mind, how to confuse your senses, how to raise your reputation, brew glory, and even prevent death. But one thing is that you are not the kind of idiots and fools I often encounter." Professor Snape spoke while wrapping his hand around his chest, resembling a big bat. At this moment, the entire classroom was silent, and almost everyone was shocked by Snape's words. Lynn N., who sat behind, was very excited in his heart. After all, this was another famous scene. Unfortunately, Lynn will be in second grade next year, otherwise he would still want to see Professor Snape asking Harry 3 times about his name. The potion class proceeded smoothly, and Professor Snape divided the young wizards into pairs, guiding them to mix and prepare a simple potion for treating boils. The group with Lynn is Irving Foley, who had a conversation with him at the dinner party yesterday. I'm responsible for handling the materials. How about you make the magic potion? Irving inquired. Lynn nodded in agreement, so Irving quickly weighed the dried nettle and crushed the snake's fangs, handing Lynn the processed materials one by one. Lynn, on the other hand, put the materials one by one into a crucible to cook. He had previewed the potion textbook in advance, and although he had not practiced it, his experience in chemistry classes in his past life made him less prone to making mistakes than other little wizards. Quickly, the medicine was boiled and they were the first group in the classroom to complete the potion. Snape walked over and twisted a drop of medicine with his finger, then sniffed it in front of his nose. Ordinary potions are not outstanding. However, because you completed the potion as quickly as possible and didn't make any mistakes, Slytherin added 5 points. Professor Snape said calmly. After the potion class, it was lunchtime, and in the afternoon Lynn and his team only had one class, which was the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts, Watson Green, arrived in the classroom on time. Just like Watson Green in the Chocolate Frog card, Professor Green is a very serious-looking man, and deep in his eyes, there seems to be an imperceptible gloom, which may have been caused by his past experiences. Please put down your textbooks. You don't need to use them in my class. Today we are going to learn general methods for dealing with some black magic creatures. Professor Green scanned the classroom and spoke slowly. Remember, you are wizards, and wands are the best tool for solving most of your problems. Perhaps your textbook suggests that you are only in first grade and do not need to learn self-defense magic, but this is my classroom and I do not accept your textbook's advice. Professor Green said, picking up a cage covered in red cloth from behind. Professor Green opened the cage and inside was a seemingly petrified 8-eyed giant spider larva, which was clearly caught by Professor Green just from the Forbidden Forest. The full-body binding curse is a type of spell that can effectively eliminate threats from opponents. Whether it is a black magic creature or a black wizard, they can be controlled by the full-body binding curse. I believe this is one of the most suitable spells for you to learn. The spell of the full-body binding curse is all petrified. After being cast, the effect is to make the subject's arms and legs stick tightly together, making their entire body stiff. Curse stand still. Professor Green spoke and then lifted the spell on the 8-eyed giant spider larvae in the cage. Pay attention to my demonstration. All petrification. Professor Green reminded the little wizards and elegantly waved his black wand in his hand. A white-gray light burst out from the top of the wand and hit the 8-eyed giant spider cub in the cage with lightning speed. This 8-eyed giant spider had just lifted its spell and had not been able to recover before being hit again by the spell. I saw the 8 legs of this 8-eyed giant spider tightly pressed together in an instant, and then its entire body became stiff, falling into the cage. After completing the demonstration, Professor Green once again took out more than 20 cages from behind, each containing a lively 8-eyed giant spider larva. Your task today is to successfully release a full-body binding spell. As long as you can petrify the 8-eyed giant spider in front of you, it is considered successful. The first person to successfully release the spell can earn a 10-point college score. Professor Green distributed these cages and said to a group of little wizards. Upon hearing Professor Green's words, all the little wizards were somewhat excited. Especially the little lions in Gryffindor next door are all rubbing their hands and planning to have a big fight. This is a full 10 points college score. Even Lynn's college points in the transformation and potion classes add up to only 9 points, while in the dark arts defense class, releasing a spell only once can earn him 10 college points. How can this not make these little wizards excited? Not only the little lions next door, but also the little snakes in Slytherin, who love honor, naturally won't miss this opportunity to earn extra points. Looking for a positive review, thank you. End of this chapter.